welcome everybody to today's session, which is Juggling Institutional Priorities, Strategies for Instructors. My name is Victoria Feth, and I am the Educational Developer, Curriculum Accessibility and Inclusion at the Center for Teaching Excellence. And I am going to begin with a territorial acknowledgement, and then I'll hand things over to my colleague Madison Hill, and then we'll hear a little bit from the organizer of all of this, Katherine Lithgo, who wasn't able to be with us today, but provided a video. So with that, today is National Indigenous Peoples Day. And I hope that even though celebrations were moved inside due to the rain, many of you were able to pause in your regular schedule to attend some of those celebrations. We also pause to acknowledge territory at key moments. And while I read this territorial acknowledgement and look forward to what Brenda will share with us today, I'm reminded that when institutional priorities start to feel like a juggling act, I can ground myself in the knowledge that our work is about people and making education better for current students and students yet to come. So the University of Waterloo acknowledges that much of our work takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our main campus is situated on the Haldeman Tract, the land granted to the Six Nations, which includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. And our active work toward reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, teaching, and community building, and is coordinated within the Office of Indigenous Relations. And I truly do see us gathering here today to have this discussion and hear from Brenda as one small part of that work. And with that, I will let Madison introduce herself.
Hello, Sego Siriguego, Madison Miyangaks. Hi, my name is Madison Hill. I am the Ed Developer of Indigenous Knowledges here at CTE. Thank you for that acknowledgement, Victoria, that was great. And thank you everyone for coming out. We're very excited to have these discussions today just about kind of the competing priorities that we all are facing in this landscape right now. So thank you so much for coming, and we really appreciate any discussion or feedback that folks have to share today.
Awesome. Thanks, Madison. So now, like I said, unfortunately, Katherine isn't able to attend today, but it really was conversations that Katherine started with us that planted the seed of the idea for this session. So Katherine recorded a short introduction, and I'm going to play it through Teams. It's about 3 minutes, and then we will have a little bit more to say about how the session will run, and then we'll hear from Brenda, which I'm sure is what everybody's really eager for this morning, this afternoon, sorry. So let me get my sharing going here.
The days are so long, it could be morning.
This is true.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session, Juggling Institutional Priorities. Really happy to have you with us today. I'm Katherine Lithgo. I'm the Senior Educational Developer, Integrative and Experiential Learning at the University of Waterloo's Center for Teaching Excellence. And while I can't be with you today in person or online, I'm really grateful to be able to introduce what I think is a very important conversation. Now, this session arose from a number of conversations that I'd had with my colleagues who are here with you today. Victoria Feth, who is our Educational Developer, Curriculum, Accessibility and Inclusion, and Madison Hill, who is our Educational Developer, Indigenous Knowledges. We were having conversations about the challenges that instructors face as they try to manage all of the institutional priorities in higher education, and often doing so while they're facing limited time, limited energy, limited resources. And these pressures are real. Universities are being asked to address a wide range of priorities ranging from things like accessibility, inclusion, mental health and well-being, indigenization, decolonization, sustainability, workforce readiness, all while facing constraints such as budget constraints and increasing demands on both faculty and staff. So one of the key messages that we want to share today is that you don't have to do everything at once. In fact, making small, intentional, and incremental changes can have a big impact. And when you try and address one institutional priority, it actually can address or promote or support a multiple number of institutional priorities. For example, if you make your course more accessible, students are often less stressed, and that helps promote or support mental health and well-being. When you start including things like Indigenous pedagogies, you're often supporting or promoting inclusivity and relational learning, which in turn promotes student well-being. And so as you listen to today's session, I invite you to think about one or two small changes that you might be able to try. Start where you are and do it in community, do it with your colleagues. Teaching can be really isolating, but when you try to come up with ways to address these institutional priorities with your colleagues, it can be really energizing and affirming, and not just for you, but for your students as well. So again, thank you for being here. I really hope that you find this session inspiring, that you leave with practical ideas and a sense of community, that you're not alone facing these, and it gives you the support you need as you continue on your teaching and learning journey.
So I'm glad that video worked, and we were able to hear from Katherine, as she was so instrumental in putting this together today. So a few more words on our topic of conversation. So in today's session, we are focusing on 3 priority areas that UW has made strong commitments to. The first is mental health and well-being. And this refers to the state of your psychological and emotional well-being. It is a necessary resource for living a healthy life and a main factor in overall health. And UW has affirmed this commitment by adopting the Okanagan Charter, which guides our efforts to promote health and wellness across campus. The second is decolonizing the curriculum. This involves challenging colonial systems and assumptions about our curriculum and educational practices. It's about disrupting dominant narratives and making space for multiple perspectives. It means asking critical questions like, whose knowledge is being amplified? Where did the knowledge come from? What stories are being told and what stories are not being told? What is the historical context that surrounds that knowledge? And indigenization specifically is the process of respectfully integrating Indigenous ways of knowing, being, doing, and relating into educational, organizational, cultural, and social structures. It's about building relationships and creating space for Indigenous voices and knowledge systems. And last but not least is accessibility. So something is accessible if it can be accessed, used, and enjoyed by persons with disabilities. And accessibility implies conscious planning, design, and/or effort to make sure something is barrier-free to persons with disabilities. Accessibility also benefits the general population. And accessible education specifically begins with the premise that good teaching is accessible. Accessible education strives for accessible spaces, accessible teaching materials, and uses the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or AODA, standards and proposed post-secondary education standards as guidance for UW's accessibility. Those aren't just abstract ideals. The University of Waterloo has demonstrated its commitment through initiatives like the University of Waterloo's Indigenous Strategic Plan from the Office of Indigenous Relations, the Indigenous Recommitment Ceremony, and the Teaching Innovation Incubator's Accessible Education Project. These efforts are also reflected in our long-term vision, Waterloo at 100, which emphasizes equity, wellness, and sustainability. And before I pass this over to Brenda, we want to hear a little bit from the folks in attendance today. So Madison is going to share with you a VVox poll.
All right. There we go. So just to get us started, we are going to just do a little word cloud about some of our feelings when we consider the pressures of implementing institutional priorities. Now, so you'll see the QR code in the left hand part of the screen. So if you scan that, you should be able to input some of those feelings that arise. And sorry, I should specify this is anonymous, so please feel free to share. And I think I just need to show results.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So anxiety and fear are definitely real. Overwhelm. Yep. It feels like there's a lot to cover. Unclear, change, positive change, frustration, anxiety. Sorry, and I should specify that when more than one person answered the same, it gets bigger. So anxiety is a big one. Sad, I can't do more. Stimulating, overwhelm, frustration. Yeah, a lot of excitement. That's a good one. Conflicting loyalty. That's a good one. Yeah, those are all very real reactions to it feels like a lot of pressure. Buzzword. Okay. Yep.
Does that say
Exhaustion.
buzzword exhaustion as one? Yeah, like
I think
buzzword
so.
exhaustion, just hearing the words again and again. And do they still have meaning after that point? And what are we actually working for?
Yeah.
Right.
Sense of obligation. Empowered. Okay. Well, I appreciate everyone taking the time to do that. I do just want to I was going to try to take a screen capture just so that we've got this to keep somewhere, just so that, that these feelings are remembered. It does feel like a lot. So I appreciate that, everyone. Thank you. So I'm going to close the poll now and we will pass it over to Brenda.
Yes, Brenda is joining us from physics and astronomy. And hopefully, after hearing from her, some of these big feelings will feel a little bit more manageable. And you'll have a few folks you can connect with going forward from this. So over to you, Brenda.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay, so I just need to load up my PowerPoint.
No worries, I think.
Okay.
You're on. Perfect.
Good? Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. So, hey everyone. My name is Brenda, and I'm an associate professor teaching stream in the Department of Physics and Astronomy. I've had multiple roles over since I started in 2019. Before I was a sessional instructor for several years, but throughout many of those roles, I've been working on really just trying to show students that I care, and I think it does target all three of the priorities over various timescales. So hopefully by showing you what I've done and some things I've collected over the past 10 years, that some of you will be able to either recognize some of the things that you've been doing already, maybe not feel so overwhelmed, and understand that you don't have to do everything all at once. Okay, so I'm pretty sure all of you are familiar with the three main priorities that have been really blasted in front of us over the past few years. So someone had mentioned buzzword exhaustion. So these three have been used quite a bit. Mental well-being, we're supposed to be supporting student mental health by fostering low-stress environments, inclusive environments. But one of the things that my colleagues regularly mention is, how do we do that because if we're trying to do that in a classroom, it increases the demands on our time to be able to foster these environments. So that's one aspect of it. Indigenization, as part of decolonizing, another word that's been used a lot, educational practices, we're trying to incorporate Indigenous ways of knowing and relational approaches to learning. And this can be really daunting if you don't understand the terms, don't understand what it involves, or do it without any proper guidance or any additional capacity to redesign your courses. And the last one is accessibility. So there's definitely a growing pressure, not just within the University of Waterloo, but as a society to ensure everything is accessible. And I think one of the most recent pushes is to make teaching accessible within the institution. I think Madison and Victoria are very well aware of that part. So we often, as instructors, lack the time, the training, and the resources to implement this in a really sustainable or meaningful way. So I just wanted to open the floor up for any other concerns that fellow instructors are faced with within these three topics. You can kind of message in the chat if there are things that you're concerned about, so that as I'm going through the presentation, I can kind of fine-tune some of the discussion towards that as well. And I'll keep on going while you think and type in the chat. Okay, so integration. When I was asked to participate in this workshop, I was asked to present different timescales in which certain things could be implemented. So one of the first things I wanted to do was to present 3 levels of timescales and what kinds of integrations could take place. The key message is what I mentioned before. You don't have to overhaul everything at once. Pick something to start with. And that something should be something that you've already started doing or something that you're comfortable with. So small intentional choices usually support one or more of the priorities that we're looking at, just because those priorities cover a broad range of things. So in terms of level of adjustment, I've broken it down into 3 different levels: simple, scalable, and systemic. So most likely we're going to focus more on the simple and scalable ones for this talk. Systemic ones are really things that are more institutional after a lot of people have invested time and resources into making the changes. So simple things, I would say, are small changes that are really easy to try and require very little preparation. So things like, we've all been teaching, we have slideshows that we use for some of our classes. In the beginning, when I first started teaching, I was very, very nervous. So teaching a physics class or a math class, I would have most of my slides with all of the solutions printed one by one. So if you click next, every single line of the solution would show up one after the other, but it's really not interactive with the class. So later on, what I did was I removed all of it so that I could solve the solutions real time in class so students could participate. But by doing that, I didn't post my empty slides at the beginning. I was afraid that students would not show up to class. So I ended up not posting any slides at all until after I finished my classes. Fast forward 1 term later or a couple terms later in the next year, I realized that a bunch of students in my teaching evaluations asked if I could post the slides before and that they'd still come to class because I was solving the solutions in class. So I started posting those empty slides, leaving them completely blank, and then solving it in class. And then afterwards, posting the fully complete slides at the end of the week with a little bit of a delay so that, they would still come to class. So I think those were many small changes that I implemented over time to adapt to my preferred teaching method. And it's not going to work for everybody, but they're just small things based off of a physics class that I was able to implement. The next level of adjustment would be scalable. So these would be practices that are expanded across a course with some decent amount of effort. So decent amount of effort means, for example, if you're looking at accessibility, I'm swapping to a different topic or priority. Let's say that you're really looking to make your course notes accessible, then you'll probably have to start somewhere, look at all the images and documents shared within a class, and provide alternative text for all of the images. So that is a pretty decent amount of effort. Some people ask students or co-op students to help with that through like different programs available on campus. But that does require a lot of time, and that's probably daunting for most of us. If we were to actually take like 32 lectures and completely make them accessible, we would need like 1 or 2 terms off just to try and get all of that done. So the last one is systemic. They would be structural shifts that are embedded into the course design and pedagogy. So things like incorporating learning circles and relational protocols into the classroom culture for the entire course and pedagogy. That's something that takes a lot more time and a lot more discussions to make sure you're doing it right. Any questions so far? Just good. I will keep going. And thanks for posting some stuff in the chat. It helps because the first thing I'll tackle is well-being. So the first thing I want to start off with is that one of the most daunting things that we took on as instructors was pivoting to online teaching in the pandemic. So teaching has really changed during those times, and so have we ourselves. So the pandemic shifted how we teach. Obviously, all of us had to learn about new tools to deliver lectures, especially for those of us who never even taught online before. We had to teach in new formats. We had to find different ways of connecting, not just to our students, but to our own family members. And so we ourselves had to take care of our own well-being. We're now a little bit more attuned to student and instructor burnout and accessibility needs. So by a show of hands, how many people experience some sort of burnout during pandemic and post-pandemic time as an instructor or staff member? Yep, so lots of you, including myself. I felt like I was glued to my computer screen like every day, 24/7. I'm not sure if that's changed, but I'm a gamer, so that has never really changed in my life. I like video games, and then going to the computer wasn't a big change. But I did learn that like posture and sitting was an issue. So, we all had to adapt in some way. So change didn't happen because we were told to. I think we had to adapt because we care. And that care can come in different ways. Either we care about our students, we care about ourselves and our time. But I think we had to adapt because we cared about various different aspects of our lives. And every one of us was able to find our own way to support our students while we were teaching, and also our colleagues, even when we were overwhelmed with everything happening around us in the world. So this session, I'm hoping, isn't about doing everything. It's about seeing what we've already been doing to empower us, and also to build on whatever we've been doing in an intentional manner to target at least one or multiple of those priorities. Okay, so some examples of adaptation. What are some ways that we have adapted our teaching? Number one, we've moved from synchronous in-person lectures to recorded options or hybrid delivery of courses. So by a show of thumbs up, how many of you have integrated some sort of recording option, or even posted your online videos currently post-COVID? Okay, so that's a lot of you. So that's actually good because that already targets one of those key priorities on campus, which is accessibility and also mental well-being in different ways. So that's one skill set that we have that we've already been doing. The other one is we've also learned how to screen share like I'm doing now. We learned to annotate, like I'm using a pointer. I'm hoping everyone can see my pointer. That's kind of been idle. Or use tablets for real-time problem solving and discussion. So show of hands, how many of you have currently, post-pandemic, had to screen share and use tablets to annotate stuff? So thumbs up. Okay, so also many of you have been doing that, and it's very beneficial for students because if you're sharing your screen, you can easily record it like the session. If you're using a tablet and sharing your screen in class, then you can easily record what you're doing. You can also, depending on the software you're using, like OneNote or something, you can also save it as a PDF or a Word document and post it online after in an accessible format. So that already targets multiple of those priorities. The other one I want to talk about is we did normalize some sort of flexibility in terms of deadlines and participation for both students and instructors. So thumbs up again. How many of you have had to become more flexible in offering accommodations for your students? Probably, I think it's now required that accommodations are need to be accommodated. So almost everyone should have their thumbs up at this point. And these are things that improve both mental well-being and also accessibility. So 3 things that we all have done during COVID and post-COVID that are targeting those institutional priorities already. And of course, the last one, I already asked that before. We recognize that burnout is a real thing for both students and instructors, and we realize that support goes both ways. So even nowadays, I recognize that some of my students are experiencing burnout, but they do ask for accommodations that might be a little bit too excessive. So knowing the boundaries between what's too much and what's acceptable is probably something that we're all still working on. So now I get to target mental well-being as that first institutional priority. And one thing I was asked to focus on was the aspect of intergenerational thinking as a decolonizing practice. So typically in Western culture and many different types of cultures, there are people who have been in a position for a very long time in a certain hierarchy, and you would have to do everything that that person is saying and passing on knowledge to in one direction only. But because of the pandemic, we actually had to do a lot of decolonizing practice by having younger generations teach older generations and vice versa. And so there was a lot of sharing of knowledge going back and forth. So that's something I think all of us have already participated in. So I'll first cover some teaching practices that support mental well-being, and then I'll go into the intergenerational thinking aspect of things. So when we're teaching, we probably are familiar with everything here. I'm just going to quickly go through all of it. Number one, as an instructor, we should probably clearly outline our expectations for the students. Be very clear with what we want them to do. Otherwise, they're going to be confused. Then there's going to be uncertainty and increased anxiety with our students. So with the course outlines on the online repository, that helps by reducing anxiety significantly. By having us as instructors follow that course outline, that further reduces anxiety. And anybody who follows their outline is already achieving that, I think. Replacing some high stakes assessments with low stakes or flexible options. Show of hands, how many people have done that? Thumbs up. Okay, lots of you. Awesome. So that by itself eases performance pressure per class and allows students to recover from setbacks. And of course, in our outlines and usually in our first intro slides or our first lecture, we usually include campus mental health and accessibility supports, either in the syllabus or the first lecture. It shows students that we care, and it normalizes the avenues in which they can seek help. But one of those things that I wanted to touch base on was the second one. If we've each, let's say that we were all teaching a class that our students had to take, and we were all teaching a course for a student in one program. So if we were each teaching a course and we have replaced all of our high stakes assessments with low stakes assessments, there's going to be a higher number of assessments for students to complete, more marking on our end, more burden for the TAs, and also more deadlines for the students to worry about. So doing small things like recording lectures, sharing notes, and being flexible with some of those deadlines for accessibility purposes, that really does help reduce anxiety for students, and it covers multiple aspects of institutional priorities. So for my classes, post-COVID, I actually did not record my lectures, but after a few, not complaints, but concerns from students about missing classes because they were too burnt out from too many assignments and not getting enough sleep, I started to record all my lectures and just post them afterwards, like a link to my Zoom meeting or my Teams meeting. And that really helps provide multiple ways to engage students and help students who are ill or overwhelmed. It's also helped fix a problem that a lot of my colleagues were worried about. People are now very well aware of illnesses. So if someone is sick and coughing, I think many of my colleagues are still worried about getting sick. So we usually now ask students, if you're ill or you're not feeling good, stay home and just watch the lecture because it's live streamed. So things like that to help promote safety and well-being on both sides. Then you don't have a student who's like using a bunch of Kleenexes in front of your class and coming to you and getting closer and closer to you to ask questions. So the next part is using group activities that can encourage mutual support. That has been done by a lot of my colleagues in biology and chemistry and earth already. It helps build community and peer care, and it reduces isolation because that's something we all are familiar with in the pandemic era. Finally, I'm sorry, my phone. I have a lot of spam calls at home. So I have the last one is to practice and model boundary setting as an instructor. So I put that in there because I have a huge difficulty handling this. I'm usually in meetings all day, and then I come home and I have a bunch of emails, and I respond to emails super late at night, even till like 1 a.m. in the morning. So those boundaries are not great. Having a little blurb in your course syllabus to let students know that sometimes just because you're responding at that time doesn't mean they can bother you at that time is really helpful. If you end up getting your schedule in check, I'm still working on it, then you can start responding at better hours. But having those boundaries helps teach students that wellness and workload management are shared responsibilities, and they go both ways. Any questions so far? We're good. There's a question period at the end, but because there's 3 topics, I just want to make sure I pause a little bit. Oh, live streaming. So Megan's question. Okay, so I have an idea for that one, but if we can save that for the question period, I can extend that discussion because I might be able to rely on some other colleagues as well who are here in this meeting. Okay, so next it's about building a supportive teaching culture because I want to target intergenerational knowledge. So one of the things about mental well-being is that when we collaborate and care across generational lines, like caring about the people who are our elders, caring about people who are younger than us, the next generation, if we can show others what works and is efficient, it has greater impact. So here are some examples of how I've supported different types of instructors through my various roles over many years. For seasoned instructors, I didn't want to use like old, so I'm going to use seasoned because it's in writing. So those who have been teaching for a very long time, I had to help significantly during the pandemic and before the pandemic with new technology. So how to record lectures. Maybe they're not as updated on current policies because they're not as up to date on their emails. I've had to share updated policies, what things to really worry about, list them out and in a priority from like 1 to 5. And give them demos of different ways that our colleagues are teaching. So, if somebody is really seasoned or let's say set in their own ways, then we can try and reach out to them and just say, did you want to set up a separate meeting to see how I can save you some time by doing this? And I think the big one is to save time if you're trying to convince a colleague to try some new technology. And I've converted a few people from our department, and they've actually fully switched to online streaming and recording and posting their notes afterwards. And it's helped a lot of our students and a lot of our classes. Another one is to reach out to new instructors and really let them know of the priorities and at University of Waterloo, and also at least share with them different strategies that have worked to save time so that they're not stressed about multiple aspects of their new position, both struggling with all the new policies they have to familiarize themselves with, and also trying out strategies that have already been tested. So we can at least say, if you do this, it is going to take a lot of time. Make sure you consider this if you really do want to implement this in your course. I have a great example of this from last term when a new instructor was teaching, and they had taken a bunch of CTE workshops and they wanted to try out about 12 different strategies in one class. And so I had told them to, narrow it down to maybe one thing you want to try because you're teaching a brand new class with brand new material, you're doing it for the first time. It's just a matter of whether they listen to you or not. And so let's just say that person may not have listened and tried out way too many strategies. And so I think as instructors, if we see sessionals or new instructors trying to be very exploratory, trying to fine tune and guide them in the right way is very important as well, because it'll affect students' well-being indirectly. And then peers at all levels. During the pandemic and post-pandemic, we usually have teaching committees within our own department. We share different teaching methods, define different moments of teaching that we find challenging, and we try to work together to see if there's anything we can solve collectively. Does it work all the time? Not really. I think we've kind of gone off the rails with setting up regular meetings, but these are things that people can do in different departments if you haven't done them already. Okay, so then to summarize, intergenerational thinking can be viewed as a decolonizing practice because, once again, this talk is about 3 different priorities. I've talked a little bit about well-being focused on supporting our peers, but that support is also, leads into the foundation of Indigenous pedagogy and mental well-being. So why is intergenerational care part of decolonization? Indigenous ways of knowing are going to try and emphasize relational and intergenerational learning, and that wisdom flows both ways between elders and youth in dialogue. Colonial systems are going to tend to compartmentalize generations and prioritize efficiency over relational care. So if we are building mentorship systems, we want to do that in a mutual way. So we can actually disrupt this and honor both experience and fresh perspectives by having seasoned instructors learn new techniques from younger instructors, and having younger instructors benefit from the knowledge that seasoned instructors have gained. So that's kind of like a two-way relational learning that, show of hands, has anybody who has been a seasoned instructor learned from a younger instructor new ways of doing things? Because I have. Right. Awesome. And of course, speaking as a younger faculty member, I've learned from many of my mentors who are actually here in this meeting. So we learn both ways, and it means we've already entered into a community-based reciprocal learning system. And that ties into the next institutional priority of indigenization and decolonization. So naturally, it brings us to whether we can tackle different aspects of these priorities together. Talking about mental well-being, we can then tie that into indigenization and Indigenous practices on campus. And the subtitle here is Shifting How We Relate Knowledge to Each Other and Integration of Learning Circle Pedagogy. So one of the things that I did try to do early on when I started my job was to integrate more active learning into my classrooms. And because I teach physics, most of the physics students coming into my classrooms really want me to just stand there in front of a chalkboard and be like Einstein or something. So they really just want me to write on a board. I think that's really boring. So for a very long time, I experimented with many different active learning methods. And when I heard about the learning circle pedagogy, actually from a CTE workshop, I thought that if I tweaked it a little bit, it would be perfect for some of our STEM classes. So that actually did work very well. And now it's been adopted and being led by Vivian Day, who's here today. I think I saw her somewhere, and Savannah Sloat. So without them, none of this would have been possible. So as a quick preamble, learning circles are essentially an Indigenous informed approach that embeds both care and well-being and dialogue and shared responsibility into classroom practice. So whatever group activity you're trying to do, a tiny tweak could actually turn it into a learning circle. So indigenization doesn't require starting from scratch. It begins with changing how we interact with each other in the classroom and how we share knowledge. And I have a few actions that could be taken and a time scale that I'll just comment on. So just like this meeting and this workshop, we've acknowledged Indigenous lands and peoples. We can do that at the beginning of the course. I think this is a very quick thing that any one of us can do. So the time scale is like short. Use relational language like we are learning together instead of I will teach you. That's also very important. That actually shifts the power dynamics in the course and supports co-learning. So I have an example of this one. This one does take a little bit of time to implement into a course, but I'll use my computational physics course as an example. So in fall, I taught Physics 249, which is Python for computational physics. And I really can't do learning circles here because I envision that learning circle to be a bunch of people sitting around in a circle on their laptops, potentially playing games and not listening to me. So I've been to classes for like teaching evaluations and also to support sessionals. And unfortunately, I do see a lot of students who are on their laptops and playing poker. That's actually one of the most common ones that I see. I don't know why, but I intentionally designed my classes so that I would learn with my students instead of teaching them and showing them how to code. So I usually leave a part of my workbooks or my Jupyter notebooks empty so that when they come to class, they have to bring their laptop. And I actually have my laptop in front of them with a screen share and it's completely empty. And I tell them to tell me what code to type out. So when different students actually participate and tell me what code to type out, I type it in and I run the code to see if it works or if it fails. And so that kind of shift in how I approached problem solving really benefited students in terms of well-being, and they felt that they were learning with the professor versus being forced to do it themselves. So that's just one example. The other one would be to incorporate Indigenous scholars, sources, and community voices. That is very course dependent. See if there's any key relevance or area that implementation can be successful. I have introduced the concept of multiple knowledge systems. So that really encourages students to recognize value in learning from both Indigenous and Western ways. So even any aspect of shared learning is useful. And finally, I'll talk a little bit about integrating learning circles into the classroom and what it's about. So for Indigenous learning circles, Savannah Sloat and Vivian Day and I were working on a light grant together on Indigenous learning circles and creating a framework for that. And just very briefly, an Indigenous learning circle, the goal is to be in a circle with a group of people that you may or may not know, and to work together to understand how to think through a problem if you're solving something in class. To work together on a problem, and to support one another by taking turns and sharing steps. And it applies a principles-based approach called the 4 R's. And here's a diagram of the 4 R's, where we're really focusing on relevance, with knowledge, responsibility, making sure everybody has a chance to speak out, respecting everyone's chance to speak out, and their opinions and perspectives, and to reciprocate all of that. So that makes the circle a lot more relational in terms of learning. So these are the four key aspects. So I would like to mention that indigenization is not about replacing your content. It may just be a small tweak to how you approach group work. It's more about transforming how students receive and give information within that group. Okay, so the main question that I've received when I started doing learning circles and it started to gain traction was whether the course required to be completely redesigned, and the answer is no. Layering things naturally onto existing group work while shifting the ethos of participation is probably the best way to move forward. So small steps. So if you have group discussions, maybe breaking it up into a circle would be nice, and having everyone express their opinions in that circle. If you have a gigantic, like 500-person class, you can't have a massive circle with 500 people participating. So maybe not the best way of best spot to implement it. Could be something like tutorials. So the other thing you can do is rotate discussion leaders. Instead of assigning one presenter as the lead, then the authority can be rotated around in a circle. You can also set up group norms together at the start of the course. So this one I think most people have done if you've done any type of group work. If there is a group assignment being done, especially during the time when active learning techniques were being created and implemented. Usually if you're working in a group, you have to set up some sort of group agreement so that everyone understands each other, and that's a great starting point. So maybe you've already done part of this in some of your work. Sometimes if you include some quiet reflection time before speaking, it allows students to de-stress and give them time to think about what and how they want to respond before being pressured to speak immediately. But we're limited in terms of how much time we have in lectures. So this is only possible depending on what field you're in and what kind of course it is. And then, of course, we can close different sessions by revisiting shared values or key takeaways. And that usually is done within a circle, but can also be done by the instructor as in a summary. So the summary that I have for indigenization is what kind of things do we have time for as instructors? And just like mental well-being, indigenization can be integrated at different levels. I would say do what you can, when you can, if you can, and if it's suitable. Not everything's going to work, but hopefully by seeing different aspects of how I've integrated indigenization into my courses, you can see whether some of them are relevant, and you can also see that they can probably cross different institutional priorities. So simple one, land acknowledgement in lectures. Second one, prior knowledge is really important. So we can always invite students to share what they've learned in previous classes, where their knowledge currently stands when they come into a class. That helps ground the discussions for that first week of lectures to the students' current knowledge. So quick question is, how many of you provide students a chance to share what they've learned coming into your courses? Anyone? Okay, few people. Okay, so that's great. So that already starts that dialogue of students coming in and you listening to what they're bringing in from a previous class. And then we can add Indigenous authors to different readings. That one I have not done quite as much yet, especially in a physics context. So depending on which faculty you're from, it might be suitable. This one for me has not been achievable to a successful extent. Scalable means we need to dedicate more time. So if you do have a term off and you're really interested in something like this, you can look at a course that you've taught already. If you've had group work in existence, maybe try out the learning circles if the size of the class is suitable. You can also build in reflective prompts that tie to community and land if the subject matter is suitable. You can also include Indigenous guest speakers when relevant, and not just because they are Indigenous. Systemic would be to co-design assignments with Indigenous scholars or community input. Like at least in the Faculty of Science, we have Savannah Sloat, but there are many different resources on campus to try and integrate things in a more cohesive, wholesome manner. We can develop departmental support for Indigenous pedagogies. And this one I like. We can reframe learning outcomes that are directly in our course syllabi to include relationality and multiple worldviews. So what this means is if you can include some aspect of being able to listen to students and learn from them and vice versa, that is a part of relationality that I think we can all easily do without much effort. And this really brings us naturally to how we can tackle accessibility. Because I've talked about mental well-being, and I think we're all in agreement that we've done some part of mental well-being already, either by being flexible with our students, recording lectures or something. That's already leading into accessibility space. Then we've talked about indigenization and trying to learn intergenerationally as well from our elders and also from younger people while we're teaching as part of decolonizing practice, and also being kind to each other and respecting each other. All of that kind of leads to a low stress environment already and a better state of mental well-being. And then, of course, accessibility, because really we're designing things for people who are different. So accessibility as everyday practice, it really isn't about perfection. It's about designing something for people who are a little bit different than how we are, someone with a disability that we may not experience. And some ways in which we can do this are, and I kind of want to give you some time to just read through these. And if you can give me a hands up, like keep your hand up, if you have done any of this before, that would be great. So I'll give you like, I don't know, 30 seconds. Okay, so I've got like 12 people who've raised their hands, which is quite a lot. I'm assuming some of you, I'm assuming everyone should be clear in their outlines. So I was hoping for like 100% of everyone to raise their hands. Or at least share some readings or slides ahead of time, and have organization on their learn shells. So I think it's been about 30 seconds. Most of you have your hands up. These are all things that are part of accessible teaching, making things clear for students so they don't have to stress about different aspects. If we're clear in our outlines, then there's less stress and less accommodations needed. And you can put down your hands if you want now. If we share readings or slides ahead of time, we can help students who are a little bit more slow and need more time to absorb the material. Those who are neurodivergent and have different ways of learning. If we use clear section headers and consistent organization in Learn, that also helps students. So could you imagine if I was teaching a course and I had all my assignments and lectures and tutorials all in one giant folder and didn't label them properly and they were all out of order? That would probably result in really bad teaching reviews, for one. And also my students would be super confused. So doing any one of these helps with accessibility as everyday practice. And I'm assuming most of us do it already. These ones are a little bit different. They target specific compliance requirements. And so using large, high contrast fonts and simple layouts for people who are visually disabled or have deficits in their vision. Adding alternative text to images for people who really can't see any of the images. The biggest one that I see in my colleagues is having embedded text in the images. So if I had saved this entire slide as a picture and posted it in another slideshow, that would be a no-no for accessibility. And finally, this one. We should probably know from the pandemic that we can record and caption our lectures and provide transcripts. So that's, for me, a very easy option that we can use to promote accessibility. So I have a two-part. How much time does this take? Simple levels. We can add alternative text to slides. It's simple, and I would say it. If you're teaching maybe like biology, there's many pictures, and it will take a really long time. If you're teaching physics and you just need like 2 diagrams in your entire slide deck, it's a little bit easier. So it really depends on what you're teaching. Using sans serif fonts, Arial, Calibri, and every few years Microsoft changes what they want as their default font. So now it's Aptos. We can caption short videos automatically. We can use slide titles for navigation. We can provide rubrics in advance. So these are things that we can do very easily. Scalable ones, which require more time and integration, would be recording lectures and uploading them weekly. Having grace days for students. What I've done, and I've tried to convince successfully some of my other colleagues to do, is to sometimes have a deadline for, let's say, Friday at 11:59 p.m. And because of the 48-hour absence that's already built in for those grace days, we can say the soft deadline is Friday, 11:59 p.m. But if you need the weekend to do it, the hard deadline is Sunday at 11:59 p.m. So that has actually worked for many of our courses in physics and has offered a lot of students the ability to set their own schedule, especially if assignments start to pile up within a week. So that would be something to do throughout the whole course. Then having consistent structure across Learn is useful too. The systemic part, which is a long-term commitment, would be to design a full course with universal design in mind. Be able to audit your course materials for full AOTA accessibility compliance. That takes a really long time. Collaborate with accessibility offices. And then try and embed accessibility training to onboarding with templates for different aspects of your teaching so that other people can benefit from it. So those would be the more daunting tasks that people are worried about. And I want to mention that accessibility really isn't a checklist. We do it because we care. It ties in with pretty much everything that I talked about before. Ties in with mental well-being because it reduces unnecessary stress on the student. It supports indigenization by honoring different ways of learning for different people. And accessible teaching is going to improve outcomes for all students, not just those with a disability. And hopefully at some point, if we approach accessibility as part of how we build community and build better teaching practices, we can move from an accommodation perspective to engaging everybody from all walks of life. So going back to these institutional priorities, I'm hoping to end off, can everybody see that they're kind of intertwined and that, if you target one thing, maybe you can target a few other things as well, just by making some minor modifications, or maybe you're already doing something in your class that targets one or multiple of these priorities. And that's all I have for my presentation.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Brenda. See lots of clapping hands appearing on the reactions. So we're going to shift momentarily into a Q&A and bit of discussion in the time we have left. I just wanted to say a few words before we do that, because I will stop recording before our discussion so that folks can feel a little bit more free to come on camera if they want, or to unmute and know that at least that part won't be included on anything that ends up on our CTE YouTube channel. But Brenda, just love the way you've broken things down into, simple, scalable, and systemic. I think that is a great way for folks to be able to look at these priorities, and especially want to focus in on that simple, because there were so many things in that simple category. And simple might mean easy for us, but it makes a really big difference to students. So if that's where you're coming in at, then that is absolutely fantastic. And it's totally great to just stay in that space until things become more possible to enter the scalable area. I really appreciated that you focused so much on drawing attention to what folks are probably already doing. And really, with all of the examples you shared, concretizing all of those buzzwords we heard about in that VBox word cloud that we opened with, right? Like the buzzwords do seem to lose a little bit of meaning. We don't always know what is expected of us within them, but there's been a lot of, like I said, making these things very real and concrete for folks throughout this. So thank you so much for sharing this all with us. And that will be a nice place for me to stop record and return to some of the questions we had earlier in the chat, as well as open up to folks other questions they might have for you.